Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. You open your wallet. Your money is still there. You look at your passport. Your name is still printed inside. You step outside. The flags are still flying above the buildings. The banks are still open. The stores are still filled with goods. Everything looks perfectly normal, but one thing has disappeared. No one believes in any of it anymore. The shopkeeper refuses to accept your money because, to them, it is nothing more than colored pieces of paper. The immigration officer looks at your passport and smiles because, to them, it is merely a few bound pages. The soldiers standing at the border suddenly realize that the line drawn on the map never truly existed on the ground. A company worth trillions of dollars suddenly ceases to exist simply because people stop believing that it exists. No buildings collapse. There is no earthquake. No asteroid strikes the Earth. No pandemic spreads across the globe. Only one thing has vanished: shared belief. Strangely enough, nearly everything that makes up modern civilization is built upon that invisible foundation: money. Nations, laws, corporations, universities, property rights, marriage, even many of the moral values we take for granted. You cannot hold them in your hands like a stone. You cannot see them through a microscope. You cannot find them inside Dan O. And yet they possess the astonishing power to make billions of people act in remarkably similar ways. It is such an extraordinary ability that no other known animal on Earth appears to possess it. A pack of wolves can hunt together. A colony of ants can build enormous nests. Elephants can mourn their dead. Chimpanzees can form political alliances. But no pack of wolves has ever invented money. No herd of elephants has ever founded a nation. No troop of chimpanzees has ever opened a bank, written a constitution, or established a university. What created such an enormous gap? What happened inside the brain of Homo sapiens that enabled us to believe in things that do not actually exist in nature? And could this ability be the true reason humanity came to dominate the Earth? Not because of our strength, our speed, or even our intelligence? To answer that question, we must explore one of evolution's strangest inventions: not fire, not the wheel, not agriculture, but the extraordinary ability to transform a story into reality simply because enough people believe in it. Interestingly, humans are not the only intelligent species. Over the past several decades, scientists have discovered astonishing abilities throughout the animal kingdom. Chimpanzees use sticks to fish termites from their nests. Sea otters use stones to crack open shellfish. New Caledonian crows craft tiny hooks from twigs to retrieve food hidden deep inside tree trunks. Dolphins recognize themselves in mirrors. Elephants can mourn deceased members of their herd for days. Humpback whales compose intricate songs that can last for tens of minutes, and those songs gradually change over time, almost like cultural traditions passed from one generation to the next. Even ants, with brains smaller than a grain of sand, can build colonies containing millions of individuals, divide labor efficiently, and coordinate with astonishing precision. If cooperation and problem-solving were the only measures of intelligence, humans would clearly not be unique. So what allowed Homo sapiens to go so much further than every other species? The answer lies in one small, but decisive difference. Animals cooperate based on what they can directly perceive. A wolf knows who the alpha is because it sees, smells, and experiences that reality every day. An elephant recognizes members of its family through memory and years of shared relationships. A troop of monkeys can form alliances to compete for food or social status. But those relationships always have limits. Once a group becomes too large, the system begins to lose stability, because every individual can remember and genuinely trust only a limited number of others. Humans were once exactly the same. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, our ancestors lived in small groups of only a few dozen people. They knew every member by name. They knew who was the best hunter, who could be trusted, who always shared food. Every act of cooperation depended on direct personal experience. Then something entirely new appeared. Humans began believing in things they had never actually seen. They believed that a symbol could represent an entire tribe. They believed that a promise remained meaningful even after the speaker had walked away. They believed their ancestors continued watching over their descendants. They believed that a piece of land belonged to us, even though no visible line existed anywhere in nature. That was the moment history took an entirely different path. For the first time, humans did not merely share food. They shared ideas. And remarkably, an idea does not have to exist in nature to produce completely real consequences. A group of people united by the same story can cooperate hundreds of times more effectively than a group relying only on instinct. But that raises an even bigger question. What happened inside the brain of Homo sapiens that allowed us to believe in an imagined story, and then behave as though it were real? That is the next great mystery science is beginning to uncover. Now, think about something that seems incredibly simple. When you see a chair, you instantly know that you can sit on it. When you see a tiger, you know you should stay away. The human brain is constantly processing the things that exist directly in front of us. But what is truly astonishing is that, most of the time, our brains are not primarily reacting to the present. They are predicting it. For years, neuroscientists have discovered that the brain does not function like a camera that merely records reality. Instead, it works more like a hypothesis-generating machine. Every second, your brain continuously predicts what is about to happen next, then compares those predictions with the information your senses actually receive. When the prediction matches reality, you hardly notice the process at all. When it does not, the brain rapidly updates its internal model of the world. This predictive ability once helped our ancestors survive. A bush rustles. It could simply be the wind, or it could be a leopard waiting to ambush. It is far safer to make a false alarm than to ignore a genuine threat. But somewhere along the course of evolution, the human brain began using this remarkable ability for something entirely new. Not just to predict nature, but to predict other people. If I say this, how will the other person respond? If I share my food today, will they help me tomorrow? If everyone in the group believes in the same promise, will we cooperate more effectively? That was the moment the human brain stepped into a very different world, the world of social models. Scientists call this ability social cognition. Humans do not simply observe the actions of others. We constantly try to infer their thoughts, emotions, intentions, and beliefs. You can look at a friend's face and recognize that they are sad without hearing a single word. You can understand sarcasm even though its intended meaning is the complete opposite of the literal words being spoken. You can even imagine how a conversation will unfold before it actually begins. This is an extraordinarily rare ability in the animal kingdom. But perhaps even stranger is our ability to imagine things that have never happened. When you read a novel, your brain creates vivid images of people who have never existed. When an architect designs a bridge, they can see the completed structure in their mind years before the first stone is laid. When an entire nation believes in a story about its own origins, millions of people can act according to a narrative that no one has ever personally witnessed. A network within the brain, one that becomes especially active when we remember the past, imagine the future, or think about other people, plays a central role in making this possible. Thanks to it, humans can step beyond the present and construct worlds that exist only in imagination. Yet those invisible worlds often produce very real changes in the physical world. A constitution, an oath, a ritual, a symbol, a story. All of them begin inside the imagination of one person, or perhaps a small group of people. But once enough people believe in them, they become the foundation of an entire society. So what was the very first story that hundreds, and later thousands, of human beings believed together? It may well have been humanity's earliest myths. If you could travel back roughly 50,000 years, you would not see stone temples. There would be no sacred scriptures, no towering statues of gods, no priests dressed in ceremonial robes. And yet, you would probably still witness something deeply familiar. As night falls, a group of people gathers around a fire. An elder begins to tell a story. He speaks of the tribe's first ancestor, of the spirit dwelling in the distant forest, of the sacred animal that guided their ancestors safely through a brutal winter. No one can prove whether any of those stories are true, yet nearly everyone listens, not only with their ears, but with their belief. For a long time, many people assumed myths were simply superstitious tales invented before humans understood science. Today, however, many anthropologists see them in an entirely different way. They argue that mythology was one of humanity's very first social technologies. Not a technology made of metal, not one built with wheels, but a technology that enabled complete strangers to cooperate. Imagine two hunting groups meeting after months apart. They have never met before. They do not know whether the other group can be trusted. In the animal world, such an encounter would often end in conflict or avoidance. But if both groups believe they descend from the same legendary ancestor, or both worship the same sacred spirit, everything changes. They are no longer merely strangers. They become part of the same story. And once people share the same story, they find it easier to share food, exchange tools, arrange marriages between tribes, work together to hunt enormous prey, protect one another against common dangers. Over time, those networks of cooperation continue expanding, no longer just a few dozen people, then a few hundred, eventually thousands. What matters most about mythology is not whether it is objectively true or false. Its true power comes from the fact that large numbers of people believe in it together. A story that cannot be verified through archaeology or science can still produce entirely real consequences. A ritual can strengthen the unity of an entire community. An oath sworn before a sacred spirit can encourage two people to honor their promises, even when no one is watching. A legend about a common ancestor can bring an end to feuds that have lasted for generations. In that sense, mythology is not the opposite of evolution. It is one of evolution's products. Groups capable of creating and maintaining shared stories generally cooperated more successfully. They protected their children more effectively, shared resources more generously, recovered from crises more easily. Across thousands of generations, those groups naturally enjoyed a greater chance of survival and prosperity. Perhaps that is why the modern human brain is especially sensitive to stories. We remember stories far longer than we remember lists of facts. We are moved more deeply by a single character than by a statistic, and we are willing to sacrifice for a shared belief, even when that belief cannot be touched or seen. But if mythology was the first great story that united humanity, there is another story even more powerful. A story that nearly everyone on Earth believes every single day. Its name is money. If a prehistoric hunter picked up a sharp stone, he could use it to cut meat. If he found a sturdy branch, it could become a spear. The value of those objects came directly from what they physically were. Money is completely different. Take a banknote out of your wallet. By itself, it has almost no intrinsic material value. You cannot eat it when you are hungry. You cannot drink it when you are thirsty. You cannot use it to keep yourself warm on a freezing winter night. And yet, with that single piece of paper, you can exchange it for food, clothing, fuel, even an entire house. So where does this extraordinary power come from? Not from the paper, not from the ink, but from shared belief. Money is not a special object. Money is a promise. When you hand a banknote to a shopkeeper, both of you are silently agreeing to the same story. Someone else will accept this piece of paper as payment. That shared belief is what keeps the entire system functioning. What is even more fascinating is that the form of money has changed dramatically throughout history. At different times, humans have used seashells, salt, bronze bars, then gold and silver, later, paper currency. Today, most of the world's money no longer exists in physical form at all. It exists only as numbers displayed on computer screens. When you receive your salary, no one hands you a chest filled with gold coins. Only a few numbers change inside your bank account, yet you still believe you have been paid, and millions of other people believe exactly the same thing. It is this shared belief that powers the modern economy. Even more astonishing, money allows complete strangers to cooperate with one another. A farmer in Vietnam grows coffee. An engineer in Germany designs machinery. A programmer in India writes software. A doctor in Brazil treats patients. They may never meet. They may not share the same language, the same culture, or even the same religion. Yet they can all exchange value through the same shared system of belief. No wolf pack has ever achieved that. No troop of chimpanzees has ever accumulated wealth for the future using abstract symbols. Money expanded the scale of human cooperation from a few dozen individuals to billions. But because money is built upon belief, it is also remarkably fragile. History has witnessed many moments when an entire monetary system collapsed within only a few days. When people lose confidence, they no longer want money. They exchange it for gold, food, or anything with tangible value. The banknotes remain exactly the same. The ink has not changed, yet their power has vanished. That reveals a profound truth. The value of money has never existed in the material itself. It exists inside millions of human minds sharing the same belief. Perhaps this is the clearest example showing that humans live in two worlds simultaneously. One world consists of rocks, rivers, forests, and the laws of physics. The other is built entirely from the stories we create together. And beyond money, there is another story even greater. A story capable of inspiring millions of people to dedicate themselves, make sacrifices, and call one another fellow citizens, even if they have never met. That story is called the nation. If you looked at Earth from space, you would see vast blue oceans, towering mountain ranges, endless deserts, expansive forests, but you would not see a single national border. There is no red line separating Europe from Asia, no gigantic wall surrounding every country, no words written across the landscape declaring, "This is our territory." Physically speaking, borders barely exist. Yet every day, billions of people live, work, and make countless decisions based upon those invisible lines. Someone may travel freely throughout their own country, but the moment they cross an imaginary line drawn on a map, they may suddenly need a passport, a visa, or official permission to enter. So what gives those invisible boundaries such extraordinary power? The answer is exactly the same as it was for money: shared belief. A nation is not a mountain, not a river, not a forest. A nation is a community of millions of people who collectively agree that they belong to the same group. They share a common history, a legal system, national symbols, collective memories, stories passed from one generation to the next. Think about a flag. Physically, it is nothing more than a piece of fabric with colors and patterns. Yet in the eyes of millions of people, it represents home, family, the sacrifices of previous generations, and the identity of an entire people. Its power comes entirely from the meaning human beings have chosen to give it. The same is true of a national anthem, a constitution, a coat of arms, national holidays. Each symbol tells part of a shared story, and together, those stories allow millions of people who have never met to feel that they belong to the same community. Political scientist Benedict Anderson famously described nations as imagined communities, not because nations are fake, but because no citizen could ever personally meet every other citizen, and yet they still feel connected. They celebrate the same victories, grieve the same tragedies, and work together to build a common future. This is one of Homo sapiens' most extraordinary abilities. We can extend our sense of us far beyond our immediate family or tribe, from a few dozen people to a few thousand, then millions, even hundreds of millions. No other known animal has ever achieved cooperation on such a scale. Yet this remarkable power also carries a darker side. Once humans can say, "This is our country," they can also say, "Those people are outsiders." The same stories capable of creating extraordinary unity can also create invisible divisions between communities. That does not mean nations are inherently right or wrong. It simply reminds us that the power of shared stories always depends on how human beings choose to use them. And the nation is not the only invisible story that possesses such power. In everyday life, there is another entity almost everyone talks about, works for, and often spends much of their lives helping to build. The remarkable thing is, you cannot actually see it. You can only see the people representing it. That entity is called the corporation. Imagine a very simple situation. You are standing in front of the headquarters of a major corporation, a glass skyscraper rising dozens of stories into the sky. Thousands of employees enter and leave every day. Servers operate around the clock. Meetings take place without end. Everything appears completely real. But ask yourself one question. Where, exactly, is the company? Can you point to a single employee and say, "That is the company"? No. An employee resigns, and the company continues to exist. Can you point to the building? But what if the company moves somewhere else? The building remains. The company has gone. Can you point to the logo? The logo is only an image. Can you point to the chief executive officer? When the CEO retires, the company still carries on. So what, exactly, is a company? Legal scholars have a fascinating answer. They call it a legal person. A company is not a flesh and blood human being, yet the law allows it to sign contracts, own property, borrow money, pay taxes, file lawsuits, and even be sued. In a sense, a corporation is a person created through language, law, and collective agreement. No one has ever seen an entire company. We only see its individual parts, its people, its offices, its factories, its computers, its contracts. But once all of those pieces are connected through the same system of rules and the same shared belief, A completely new entity comes into existence. That entity is the company. This may sound highly abstract, but consider a familiar example. If every employee of a business resigned tomorrow, new employees could be hired. If the headquarters relocated to another country, the business would continue operating. If the founder passed away, the company could survive for decades, or even centuries. In other words, a company does not depend on any single individual. It exists because countless people accept the same story. That story is written into its charter, its contracts, its laws, the trust of its customers, the confidence of its investors, the expectations of its employees. Only when all of these elements exist together does the company truly come alive. What is remarkable is that billions of people spend much of their lives serving invisible entities like these every single day. They sign contracts with them, receive salaries from them, invest in them. Some even proudly say, "I work for this company," not because anyone forces them to, but because everyone shares the same system of belief. This is a form of cooperation that has never appeared in any other known animal species. No herd of elephants has ever founded a business. No wolf pack has ever created a corporation capable of surviving across generations. No troop of chimpanzees has ever built an organization with hundreds of thousands of members spread across multiple continents. Only humans can create invisible entities, then cooperate with one another so those entities function as though they were truly alive. But this also raises a profound question. If money, nations, and corporations all exist because people believe in them, what happens when millions of people suddenly stop believing those stories? History has answered that question many times, and every time it has, the world has changed. In nature, a mountain does not disappear simply because people stop believing in it. An ocean continues to exist even if no one gives it a name. The sun still rises every morning regardless of what we believe. Those are physical realities. But the world humans have built contains another layer of reality, one created through collective agreement. And because that reality is built upon belief, it can change with astonishing speed. Look back through history. For centuries, the Roman Empire stood as one of the greatest powers the world had ever known. Roads stretched across Europe. Its armies seemed almost invincible. Its laws influenced millions of people. To those living at the time, the Roman Empire appeared destined to last forever. And yet, everything changed. Not because every city suddenly vanished, but because the network of shared beliefs that once held the empire together slowly began to fracture. Different regions no longer recognized the same authority. Administrative systems weakened. Loyalty became divided. The invisible story that had united millions of people gradually fell apart. Centuries later, history witnessed another example. The Soviet Union once covered an enormous portion of the earth. It possessed an army, borders, a constitution, a national flag, a vast government. Yet within a relatively short period of history, that entire system collapsed. Borders were redrawn. New flags appeared. New nations were born. That did not mean the people themselves disappeared. The cities remained. The people remained. Only the shared story they believed in had changed. The same thing has happened with money. During periods of hyperinflation, people have carried entire suitcases full of banknotes simply to buy a few loaves of bread. The notes were printed on exactly the same paper, with the same colors, the same signatures, yet their value had almost completely vanished. Not because the paper had changed, but because belief had changed. Financial history has repeatedly witnessed speculative bubbles. The price of an asset rises not because it becomes more useful, but because people believe someone else will later pay an even higher price. As long as that belief survives, prices continue rising. But the moment belief disappears, the entire system can collapse with astonishing speed. What is especially remarkable is that these phenomena are not limited to economics or politics. They reveal something much deeper about the human brain. We do not merely react to reality as it is. We react to what we believe other people also believe. This is a form of second-order belief. I believe this money has value because I believe that you also believe it has value. You accept it because you believe the next person will accept it as well. It is this vast network of shared expectations that keeps civilization functioning every single day. Yet it also means that civilization must constantly be sustained by trust. When trust breaks down, even the strongest-looking institutions can begin to crumble. Perhaps this is the greatest paradox of Homo sapiens. Our shared stories have allowed us to build the greatest civilizations in history. Yet those very stories are far more fragile than they appear. And that leads to one final question. If the ability to believe together in invisible things brought humanity to the top of the world, then what new stories are we beginning to create in the age of artificial intelligence? For tens of thousands of years, human beings have continued creating new stories. First came mythology, then money, then nations, laws, corporations, universities, stock markets, the internet. Each era has added another layer of reality built upon shared beliefs. But today, we may be standing before the greatest turning point of them all, for the first time in history. Human beings are no longer the only participants in the conversations shaping civilization. Artificial intelligence has begun answering questions, writing reports, translating languages, programming software, creating original works, even helping people make important decisions. That has led many to ask an unsettling question. Could AI be becoming a new participant in the world of shared stories humanity has created? Perhaps the most remarkable development is not that AI can generate text. The remarkable part is that millions of people are gradually accepting those responses as part of everyday life. We ask it for directions, seek advice, search for knowledge, make plans, solve problems. A new form of trust is slowly emerging. Not trust in paper money, not trust in a flag, but trust that an artificial intelligence system can help human beings make better decisions. At the same time, the digital world is creating entirely new forms of reality. A digital asset can be bought and sold for tremendous value. An online identity can influence someone's real-world career. An internet community can unite people living on different continents who have never met face-to-face. A meeting can take place even though no one is physically in the same room. To our ancestors living thousands of years ago, all of this would have seemed like magic. Yet from the perspective of evolution, it follows the same familiar principle. Human beings continue expanding the range of stories we choose to believe together. Long ago, a tribe consisted of only a few dozen people. Today, billions of people can share the same financial systems, access the same global information networks, and cooperate to solve worldwide challenges. The ability to create and share common realities remains the driving force behind civilization. Yet every step forward also brings greater responsibility. A true story can unite millions of people to cure diseases, explore space, or protect our planet. But a false story can spread faster than ever before, creating division, manipulation, and distrust on a global scale. Perhaps that is why the greatest challenge of the future is no longer whether humanity can create new stories. The real challenge is whether we possess the wisdom to distinguish between stories that move humanity forward and stories that pull us apart. Because from the small campfires of our earliest hunter-gatherer ancestors to today's world connected through artificial intelligence, what has always made Homo sapiens unique has never been imagination alone. It has been our extraordinary ability to choose, together, which stories we believe. And those choices will determine the next chapter in the history of human civilization. From the stories once told around campfires tens of thousands of years ago to today's global financial systems, nations, corporations, and digital worlds, humanity has built a civilization upon a remarkable ability that no other known animal possesses on a comparable scale. The ability to believe together in things that do not physically exist. A banknote is only paper. A nation is nothing more than invisible borders. A corporation is simply an idea recognized by law and society. Yet when millions of people share the same belief, those ideas can reshape the course of history. Perhaps the true reason Homo sapiens became the dominant species on Earth is not because we are the strongest, not because we are the fastest, nor because we are the most intelligent in every respect, but because we can create stories together, believe in them together, and act as though they are real. That is the foundation upon which every civilization in history has been built. If this video has made you see the world from an entirely new perspective, leave a comment below. In your opinion, which shared story has the greatest influence on human life today? Don't forget to like and subscribe to join us as we continue exploring the most fascinating mysteries of evolution, history, and the human mind. And in our next video, we will dive into an even deeper question. Why do humans need stories to survive? If language allows us to communicate and shared beliefs allow us to build civilizations, then why did the human brain evolve to love stories in the first place? Why do we cry over fictional characters? Why do we remember stories far longer than isolated facts? And why has nearly every culture on Earth passed stories from one generation to the next? Perhaps it was stories themselves that enabled Homo sapiens to survive, from the prehistoric world all the way to the modern age.